tuning in to the Illuminations Podcast. We love having you here. It is our mission to be a beacon of light on your journey towards conscious and mindful living. In our weekly episode, we bring you inspiring change makers in the field of spirituality, healing, personal growth, and wellness who share their insight and expertise so you can navigate your way to a happier, healthier, and more purposeful life. What does money really have to do with your sense of self-worth, safety, or the way you show up in love, especially after a relationship ends? In today's episode of the Illuminations World Podcast, I'm joined by Natasha Mahtani, an accredited relationship and divorce coach and a money mindset expert who helps women shift their relationship with money, not just in their bank accounts, but in their bodies, their boundaries, and their belief systems. We talk about the emotional side of money, the shame, the avoidance, the overgiving, and why financial literacy isn't just about investing smarter, but living more securely, especially when you're navigating love, loss, or divorce. So if you felt uncertain about your finances or found yourself outsourcing your security to someone else, this episode will meet you exactly where you are at and help you take that first step to gain back your financial power. So welcome to another episode of the Illuminations World Podcast. I'm your host, Soniyaa. Thank you, Natasha, and thank you so much for being here on yet another episode of the Illuminations World Podcast. I found your content on Instagram very interesting, and we've had very brief conversations about what you do, and I was very inspired on your story and how you've navigated through love, loss, finances, investing, and being a single mom raising a lovely boy. So I'd love to know a bit more about your journey and what brought you to this path of becoming a relationship coach, money mindset expert, because I know that everybody has a personal journey and I would love to hear yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So mine started about 12 years ago when I got divorced. My son at the time was only 15 months old, and I didn't know anyone who left with a child or who got divorced. So I moved back to London and life got really busy. I was taking care of him. 2 years later, his father cut all contact, pretty much ghosted us as such. And I started to realize that, oh my gosh, this, where I thought we were going to get into a co-parenting relationship and we'd have joint responsibility of our child, we didn't. I had full responsibility for my son. Mm-hmm. So I started throwing myself into working multiple jobs because I used to lay there at night thinking, how am I going to send this kid to university? And he was only 3. But that's the kind of stuff you worry about, right? When you're thrown into this kind of situation. Yeah. And I was working all the jobs and doing all the things and just always felt like everything was out of grasp. Like I'd have enough money. He was at a great school. We were doing great things. But then I was like, what comes next? Mm-hmm. And it was only, I think, 5 years after that, I started hearing about money mindset through some people that I was following online. And I thought, oh, okay, what's that about? And so I started by working on my own money mindset. And gosh, the things that came out, all the limiting beliefs and the things we're told about money, not just from our families, but from, society at large. And around the same time, I realized there was so many people messaging me on Instagram because they just wanted some sort of hope that they would be okay. Mm. And so it was actually just before lockdown, and I was already a life coach, but just before lockdown in 2020, I did training and became an accredited divorce coach. And I started working with women who were experiencing divorce. But I would always say I'm the divorce coach that doesn't want anyone to get divorced, right? Absolutely. Because I don't. Yeah. And I also realized that a lot of people who were getting divorced actually maybe didn't need to get divorced if they'd seen a relationship coach during the time that they were married. And so I did further training to become a relationship coach. And that's when I started then helping women with sort of in their relationships or if they were experiencing divorce and with their money mindset, because the number one reason women stay stuck in relationships that aren't working for them is money. Like there's no two ways about it.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how you transform your pain into your power, and that's amazing and so courageous. But I know that we come from the same culture. And I don't know about your background and upbringing, but I would assume it's very similar. And we were always told that, you're going to get married and you're going to have a husband and he's going to provide for you. And I never opted for that channel, but we were never really taught that, you have to be financially independent and you have to start investing at a young age. So when I started my career, it was at the age of 23. I was making money, and for a very long time, I was trying to navigate what I would do with this money. It just so happened that I organically bought real estate, or I was investing in the stock market because a friend happened to guide me accordingly. But at that point in time, I didn't even think about the idea that I could go to a mentor or a coach to be able to kind of help me navigate through this. And I realized, of course, that money is such an important factor. And so many women in our culture think, oh, that's my husband's job or my father's job or my brother's job. Whereas in fact, today life is changing, and the way people are living, lifestyles are changing. And so it's so important for, I think, women. And back then, in my friend circle and in my community, nobody was even looking at that. Everyone just like, oh, my dad is there, my husband's there, my brother's there. And so I found that, I found what you do so empowering and so much the need of the hour for so many women,
Yeah, and you're so lucky that you had someone who was guiding you back then, and you were mentioning about not having a coach. To be honest, there wasn't anyone, back then in our 20s, there wasn't anyone who was doing anything like it. Like the idea of investing was very old school. It was very like, oh, go and see this wealth manager, or go and see this broker, or make an appointment with this person who will, invest for you.
Yeah.
And now you don't have to do that. Like now you don't need to see anyone where you're giving away 1.5% to 2% of, what you earn. You can do it yourself. And I think that's what I want people, but especially women, to know that it's not that difficult. They make out like it's really difficult with all the jargon and stuff like that. But if you move past that, even if you're someone who doesn't have, someone guiding you, you can find out what you need to do in order to invest.
And when you talk about money mindset, and you say that's the first starting point to investing, can you just elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so money mindset is how you see money. It's how you view money. It's how you feel about money. It's what goes on in your body when you talk about money. And I know people who are millionaires who have very poor money mindset, and so it's not about how much money you have.
Absolutely.
And then there are people who don't have as much, but they're just really abundant in the way that they, in the way that they choose to live. And I think the biggest reason that you need to work on your money mindset before you start investing is because investing can be daunting, and it can bring up so many emotions, especially if the market isn't doing particularly well for a while. And we see this in the way that the markets work, right? Like it drops slightly and suddenly people start panic selling. And all of that comes from the fact that their money mindset, like they can't regulate themselves enough to be like, okay, this is a drop, it's fine. It's different if you're a trader, right? If you're a trader and there's a drop, you're like, I've put money on that, I need to change it. But I'm talking about investing. Investing shouldn't bring out that sort of panic feeling within you. And I grew up in a pretty liberal Sindhi household. And even then, gosh, even though my parents were really liberal, it was very much about equality. Even to date, whatever we're given, my brother and I, it's very equal. And still, I had so many layers of like sort of limiting beliefs around money that I had to unpack. And now I've been doing it for 7 years. And sometimes I'll still be like, oh, that's why that happened, 7 years on. So it's like an onion, right? You peel the layers of it, and you're always kind of learning.
Absolutely. And what are some of the common like limiting beliefs that people have around money? Which are quite ironic and not so easy to kind of point out, because many times you think a person spends a lot of money, that means they have an abundant mindset, but that might not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if it's just like shopping, or it's like a sort of addiction, more of an addiction than anything else. To me, that's masking another emotion that they're probably trying to suppress. I think some of the biggest ones, especially with women, are things like, and actually this is for everybody, investing is risky. So, they'll overhear a parent be like, oh, so-and-so lost his pants doing that, and I gave my money to this person and he lost it all. And so thinking that it's super risky is a big one. Another one is almost like having to not talk about money, especially as a woman, this one is not talk about money for fear of coming across as masculine, right? So it's like women don't talk about money, you know, the men handle the affairs.
Right.
And that's a big one that comes up.
It's a big one.
Which I find
or speak to my husband, or he'll know more about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to a point where women almost like put themselves down. Like they put themselves down because they don't want to like quote unquote emasculate their partner.
Right.
You know, and so they by coming across like they know so much. So in my 20s, I was always the person who, you know, if you went for dinners and it was with couples, they would inadvertently end up sitting with all the men on one side and all the women on the other side. And I would always sit on the first seat next to the men, just so I could like kind of turn around and listen to some of the conversations, because I found them so interesting. This was when I was still married, and I was living in Hong Kong, and this was in my 20s.
It's very cliche that the guys would talk about money and finances and business, and the girls would talk about shopping and holidays.
And so I would always just sit on the corner, turn slightly, and then just, you know, listen to all of those conversations, because I used to work and I used to help in a family business, and I found it so fascinating to, you know, to know what was going on. And I never understood why like the women didn't want to have those conversations.
But I definitely think things are changing now. I think a lot more people, especially the Gen Z, are becoming so much more aware. And the world is changing, right? Whereas when I was growing up, a career wasn't as important. It was just about getting married and having kids. And today, everybody realizes the importance of having meaning and purpose in their lives, be it a professional career, at least doing something that adds value to them, contributes, helps them to actually utilize their talents and not just be at home or stay-at-home mom after a certain age. You know?
Yeah, that's true. And you're right. I'm really grateful that it is changing. But if you look at the stats around like the wealth gap and some of the things that women are experiencing, it's not changing near fast enough. You know, I have people who will slide into my DMs and tell me what they're experiencing, and it's really sad. I'll bump into people socially. I had a lady who came up to me at the gym when I lived in Lagos, and was like, "Oh, I thought I recognized you from Instagram," and she started crying when she told me what she was experiencing. Another lady I met at a party, she said, this was like at a party at midnight, and when she found out what I do, she was like, "Oh, well, I've just got to wait another like 4 to 5 years." And I said, "Oh, okay. Like, how come?" And she said, "Because if I leave, he'll stop paying the school fees, and my kids go to boarding school in the UK." And so there's still, money is being used as a form of control.
I was just going to say that. Yeah. A lot of men use money as a form of control to basically have the upper hand in a relationship.
Yeah.
You know, and that's so sad because, you know, every relationship is kind of like a partnership. The fact that you can go to work and make the money and still have kids in a home to come back to is because your wife is doing a much harder job than you, which is raising kids.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy job. That's probably one of the most underrated jobs in the world. And, you know, obviously you're a mom, you would know more than me. But it's just like, so the reason a man can do that is because of a woman. And so...
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that, because that emotional labor kind of gets, you know, pushed under the rug. And I don't think sometimes, men appreciate just how much is being done behind the scenes that allows them to do what they do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're raising a young son. How do you help him with money and investing and saving? Because obviously we live in a place like the UAE or Dubai, and not just Dubai. It's like, it's the world we live in today. You have social media, you have influence, you have, you know, kids wanting to spend money and buying the latest gadget or buying the latest sneakers. How do you manage that with a young child and instill those values of saving, investing without sort of depriving them of things, but not really actually giving them too much that would overtake that sense of resilience as they get older?
Yeah, with great difficulty.
I can imagine.
With great difficulty.
No, it's crazy. I was speaking to a 5-year-old, you know, my friend's son, and apparently he was traveling, and, you know, his friends asked him, "Did you fly in economy class or business class?" I'm like, "They're 5." It's like, you know, we didn't have that exposure.
Yeah.
You know, when we were younger, like, we grew up very simply, even if we had money, we probably didn't know that, you know, whereas today, the world is so different. And so how do you kind of, because you have your child only for a few hours in the evening or probably in the morning, but the rest of the time they're in the outside world and they're exposed and influenced by friends and what they talk about. And these friends have older brothers and sisters. And so there's a lot of influence happening around. And how do you navigate through that as a mom and not really get
concerned.
Oh, I'm very concerned. But I think it's having very, very honest and open conversations. Like so often, with a lot of people, it's like, don't talk about money with the kids, or don't let them know maybe you're going through a tough time. And it's true, there's an age and time when you should be talking to your children about that. But I think for me, and I mean, it's a work in progress. I think I just try my best to talk to him about like what I feel at this age is there's value for. So just as an example, because you mentioned Dubai, like if it was up to him, he'd go jet skiing every weekend, right? Every weekend. The weather's nice enough. And I have to then talk to him about, well, okay, but that's going to add up to this. What can we do instead? And on the investing piece, actually, it was because he's 13 now. He started investing when he was 12. He's very entrepreneurial in general. He loves talking about money. He's 13 now, but he's had several businesses, little businesses, but he's always made, money. He's always looking for new ways to make money. So I'm like, it's great that you make money, but let's talk about how you can make that money grow. So he invested last year on his 12th birthday. My parents had given him some money. He invested it. Obviously, throughout the year, he's like, can I cash it in? Can I cash it in? And I was like, that's not how it works. But then this summer, so he was like 13 and 3 months, he was like, okay, I want to cash it in. And I had a real moment around my money mindset, because I was like, why don't you just keep it in there? This particular stock is doing so well, it might go up. And actually, it was one of my closest friends who said to me when I was telling her about it, she's like, you need to give him the opportunity to cash it out, blow it, and learn.
Absolutely.
And learn that he then spent it. And I was like, actually, you know what? You're right. I think as parents, sometimes we want to over control the situation a little bit. It's just, we want to protect them, right? I want the money to grow for him. And so instead he cashed it out. We were in London for a month. It had grown quite significantly. So he had close to £900, and he blew the entire thing. And he loved every moment of it. He loved every moment of it. He really enjoyed it. So, I mean, that's the other piece I have to say, is that money needs to be fun. We need, it's an energy. And if we're constantly going to be like, oh my gosh, this is so expensive, or I don't have this, or, those people are spending like that, or only wealthy. Those are all limiting beliefs as well. I don't want him to grow up with the belief that, people who have money are like tax avoiders, or that people who have money are greedy. No, I want him to grow up to believe that money is a thing that's fun.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of working, because he said to me recently, he was like, oh, I really look forward to when I'm old enough and I've made lots of money, so I can just be able to go to the supermarket and tap to the person's grocery in front of me, like to buy their groceries for them. And I'm like, all right, good. I truly believe that money in the hands of good people can only do good things.
Absolutely. So. Consciously wealthy.
Exactly.
Amazing. And so how do you normally work with people? Is it one-to-one, or you do these group classes and master classes?
Yeah, so typically it has been one-to-one. When I lived in London and Lagos, I did in-person group things. I love in-person things.
Me too.
Yeah, just, being with people, the energy, it's so different. But, the world is changing, and people want to be able to access the information outside of that. And so, with the new course, Her Portfolio, it's a 6-week group coaching program. It is online, but that's a new way that I'm working now, just to be able to start helping people and helping women, supporting them through that process. Because the other thing is, there are tons of courses out there, and I've recommended lots to people. I don't gatekeep on my Instagram, but I find that a lot of them are pre-recorded, and what women actually want, at least from what I can tell, is just to have their hand held through it. I've signed up for so many courses, and if it's pre-recorded, I never finish them. I rarely ever finish them.
Yeah, you're the self-paced.
Yeah, self-paced. The self-paced will take me 10 years. So, going through it with them week by week for 6 weeks means they come out of it and they're in there. They're investing. They know exactly what they're doing. Like, their hand is held all the way through.
And so, like we discussed earlier, you don't tell people where to invest. You empower them with education tools and platforms on how they can educate themselves to grow their wealth on their own.
Yes, exactly. So I'll take all the knowledge I have and tell them exactly what I know and how I did it and what they can look out for. And we'll talk about like money mindset, obviously, but risk appetite and, what exactly is an ETF? What exactly is a stock? Because when you get used to it, you throw the jargon around, right, really easily. And you don't realize that actually a lot of people have no idea even just what an ETF is, for example. And so, unpacking all of that so that they feel more empowered. Because it's very easy to just say, this is doing really well by that. And I do that. I do that with some friends and family. Or this is the ticker on the stock market or whatever, you should invest in that. I think it's going to be really big. But what's the point if in a year's time they have no idea what the next big thing is, right? Whereas once they have the tools to figure out what they are, that's it. It's the whole, do you teach someone to fish or do you give them a fish? I want to teach them how to fish so that
absolutely
they can do it themselves.
And what are some tips that you give to women on saving? So let's say if they wanted to buy that latest handbag or that latest shoe, and let's say maybe they're not working or they're on a budget, or maybe they are working. What would be some of the tips that you'd give them to be more smarter with their money rather than just blowing it up?
So I wouldn't tell anyone to save. I mean, you should have a sort of like an emergency fund, or have enough in a bank account that if you weren't working for say 6 months or whatever, you have enough to take care of your basic needs. After that, you need to be investing, because if you look at inflation and everything else, anything that you save is losing value in the bank every day. Now, of course, I'm going to just caveat that and say, if you're saving for something specifically that you want in 6 months' time, then yes, save it, because you can't guarantee that we're only going to be in the green if you're investing in something. So if you want it in 6 months' time. But if you think, oh no, I'm happy to invest for the next 2 years and then get this big thing, then I would say invest it and use the profits from what you make to buy the thing. So I don't know, I always operate and say, own the share before you own the bag. But
absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's the thumb rule when, let's say, a person earns, say, $1,000 a month? How much would you say should go into investing, spending, and obviously expenses?
Yeah. So there is a rule around percentages that you should be putting into your household versus what you're spending versus what you're able to save. But with a figure like that, it really depends on, where you're living.
I'm just saying, for example, it could be $20,000, but what's the percentage?
So the percentages. So most people do, I think it's like a 30, 60, 10 sort of thing, but it differs obviously for different people and depending on what you want. But that's where...
So 30% is investing?
No. So your sort of 50 to 60% is what you need. Your 30% is what you want. So like the more fun things. And then the balance is what you put towards saving or investing.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have to cover your basic needs first.
Okay, that's amazing. And what are some of the ways that, when a person joins your course, like we spoke about, like the money mindset. So even before investing, you kind of help them to change their beliefs around money? Is that what it is?
Yeah, so we will do like the first 1 to 2 sessions, so like 1.5 sessions. It's really tapping into what are some of those beliefs that you formed around money. How do you feel about it? Like, how do you feel about it in your body when we start talking about money? And what I actually get people to do is I introduce them to a demo platform, and I say to them, just, put, like, the demo platform gives you like $500,000, and I'm like, just put money into it. Just pick and choose what you want. You don't even have to know about investing yet, because when you look at it every week and you see it going down, even though it's a demo and that it's not really $500,000 going up and down, you can tap into exactly what's making you feel uncomfortable about that and figure out, like,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, what am I feeling when that's going up and down? Because later on, when we're actually investing, with money that's yours, that you've worked hard for, I want them to be regulated when it goes up and down, because it will go up and down. That's just the nature of the stock market, right? And they have to be ready for that. But it also lets you look at, why do I spend the way that I'm spending?
Right.
What is it about this thing that I'm buying? Like, what is it really giving me? Like, do I really love it as much as I think I love it? Or am I just buying it because it's a status thing? It goes a lot deeper, but essentially we're exploring how they feel about money and just getting more, like, in tune with being able to talk about it and not, and, you know, look at your bank account. Like the statistics again around number of people in the US who fear money, who don't know what is in their bank account, who, when they estimate, can't tell you what they spend in a month. You know, very much it's like, and that's why actually, you know, big companies have now come out, this whole like buy now, pay later culture and debt culture. You know, it's leading us to more consumerism. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, I just think do it with the profits of your investing. That's all.
Absolutely. But, you know, we live in a place like the UAE where it, you know, on the surface, it seems like a very strong abundance culture, right? So over here, people have a lot of money. They have a lot of money to spend. They, you know, they live very lavish lifestyles. And sometimes many people live beyond their means. And that can be an issue, especially because you raise this whole idea about how it's all about perception and how other people perceive you. And that's a huge, basically, I guess, a limiting belief, but also a way people spend more than they actually should. Can you just give me a little bit about that? Because I see that happening a lot, especially in our culture.
Yeah.
That people's self-worth is attached to how much other people like perceive them and how much money that they have.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that's a very tricky one, I think, because, well, there's two sides to it. On the one side, I think that's what's wonderful about Dubai and the UAE is that, yes, there's a huge amount of abundance, and with that comes a lot of like kind of show. And I think Dubai has sold itself on that, but I actually think it's doing itself a huge disservice, because like when I moved here, a lot of people would say to me like, "Oh, how's the Dubai life?" Almost like, and I remember
I got that in Singapore just recently. So how's the Dubai life? And I'm like, I'm far from the Dubai life.
Exactly that. And
because there's so many of us, so we're just like,
and I just remember saying like, yeah, I don't think you know me well enough. Like you can choose how you want to live. I actually think that I really feel, and I say this with absolutely no judgment, but I really, really feel for those people who feel like they need to show a certain side of themselves and feel like they need that their self-worth is kind of linked to that, because I've had a couple of those people as clients. And I remember having to say to one client once, I really need you to bring your Insta life and your real life in like back into balance a little bit, because right now they're so far apart that you don't even know what's going on, right? Because I could see her on Instagram, and then I would see her in my sessions like in tears, and I'm like, we need to just bring it into alignment. So I think a big part of it also is starting to work on what is it about the way that I'm behaving that I need, like what is the need I need these people to fulfill. But you know, it's tricky also because we live in a world, and this is not Dubai specific, where people, you know, as humans, status is important. And here we've sort of decided that having a certain bag or living in a certain home or driving a certain car gives us status. And in many ways it does, because people will often, you know, link someone's popularity or whatever with those status games. I think it just depends on what you want. Look, at the end of the day, if you sleep well at night, then who am I to say that you shouldn't?
Yeah, whatever rocks your boat.
Yeah, if you sleep well at night, then that's great. But if you're not happy and you're still not doing anything about it, then I think, well, that's such a pity, because all the resources and all the help is out there.
Absolutely. So if a person wanted to start investing, whether male or female, today, with what they have, what are some of the first steps that you would guide them to take?
I would tell them to first think about what their risk appetite is. So what is their risk appetite? How long do they want to look at it for? Do they want to be able to put money in something, not pay any attention to it, and see where it's at in like 15 to 20 years time? If they're going to do that, they would look at index funds or like baskets of stocks, because they're safe. They kind of give an annual return of about 10% on average over time. So, you know, and that's great. If you're putting in quite a significant sum to begin with, then 10% is good. But if you're someone who, you know, has a bit more risk, you're a bit more okay with risk, then I would say start looking at individual stocks, because I truly believe that we've never lived in a time like this where it's as easy or as exciting.
And as volatile.
Yeah, but it is, but it isn't as well if you kind of know what you're doing. So if we're talking about crypto, yes, that's volatility. But if we're talking about companies where you can do the research, I don't think it's that volatile, to be perfectly honest. There's ways to kind of look at it to be like, oh yeah, okay, that will give me an easy sort of 50% minimum, if not more, in the year. So I'm going to go with that. So it just depends on what your risk appetite is, I think. But they need to figure that out first. And also, don't listen to the trends. If you don't want to take the risk, but everyone's like, put it into this and put it into that, I heard good things about this, I don't listen to them. Don't listen to them, because that's the surefire way to lose your money.
And so you've been a relationship coach, and from your clients and your experience, do you feel that men see women who are financially independent and treat them in a relationship, whether it could be a marriage or a partnership, in a different way as compared to if a woman is not earning money? Is that something that you see?
Yes, I have seen it with some clients. It's very subtle, because
that's what I hear as well. Yeah. It's very subtle.
It's very subtle because I remember speaking to a couple once, and he said, she can do whatever she wants. She has she has the credit cards, whatever. She can do whatever she wants. She can buy whatever she wants. And yet she was like, all right, but then it's also a question of like.
So he gets the SMS.
Yeah, exactly that. He gets the SMS, and it's also a question of like, okay, but if I want to do what I want to do it. I don't want to say without judgment, because maybe he's not judging her, but maybe she just wants to do something that's completely frivolous, and this has to be a level of privacy to it, right? So it's like, just because she's allowed to buy whatever she wants, where's the privacy? And I think that's something that's so subtle that they don't see it that way. They're just like, she can do what she wants, and it's like, how about you just ask her?
And what about women who work and probably might be even more successful than a man? Do you see that happening, and do you find that affects a man's ego?
Yeah, again, I think it comes down to having very, very open conversations about it. And culturally, it's, it just depends on the conversation, but also what they're doing. So I'll give you an example. I had a client once whose partner had gone off and started like his own hedge fund, and he was doing his own thing, and he was doing really well, but he wasn't drawing a salary. He just kept putting everything back into his business. And so essentially she was earning everything, paying for everything, taking care of their 3 children. And then what happened was she'd be doing things very quickly because she didn't want him to feel like she was spending all the money and he wasn't. But it was really weird because they couldn't have a conversation about money. Like, she was so nervous, and yet she was handling everything. She was taking care of everything. And it was because, and I think that comes down to the whole, trust me, I know what I'm doing, I'm a man thing, because his thing was, but I'm putting it back into the business, and then I'm putting it into these funds for our children. So when they're like this age, they'll access it. And there was no conversation around, but what about now? What about the fact that she was feeling completely burnt out with having to pay for everything and not being able to give anything to herself? So, it's okay if a woman out earns a man, but it has to be a conversation. Like, don't try and almost dim your light to make him feel better, because ultimately he's not feeling good about it either.
Right. And do you feel like women who work and earn their own money and are quite independent can often kind of be living a lot more in their masculine? And a lot of traditionalists will say that, well, it's a man's job to be the provider, whereas it's a woman's job to be a nurturer. And so when she's caught providing and she is like independent, she kind of, is operating from her masculine, and that obviously, it doesn't help the relationship, because in the end, women want to be looked after and cared for as well. And so if a man isn't providing, a woman has to play the role of the man and kind of become that provider, and that can lead to a lot of energetic imbalances, which can show up in relationships as, being the dominating one. It's like that male ego sort of, it's like issues that come about. And so what's your perspective on that? Because we work a lot with energy, and we understand that, a lot of women sometimes take it maybe too extreme, as they would say, like really overtly ambitious and probably not listening to their feminine. And maybe because I was, like we just had a previous podcast now on how the way a woman works. And so what would be your perspective on that, and how would you probably address that? Because, we understand everything is energy, and sometimes if you are not playing an energy that you were not designed to play, men are programmed to maybe have a 24-hour cycle, whereas women have a 28 cycle, like a 28-day cycle. How does that impact the relationship and,
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I truly believe that women only step into their masculine energy when they have no choice. Mm. And I definitely realized I was doing it. So in the first few years after I left, I definitely felt like I was stepping into my masculine energy of provider, because I became the provider, right? Like I was providing for my child, and I had to step into that role of I've got to do everything. And it actually took me some time to realize that was what was happening. I wanted to step back into my feminine because that was innately who I was, the more feminine. So I think a lot of women, they only step into their masculine when they have to. But when they're with a man who's able to step into his his alpha, but his positive masculine, they're able to drop into their feminine. So even when it comes to money, there was kind of two parts to it. Because if it's someone who's, also earning a lot of money, but so is her partner, then they can almost bounce ideas off. She can still be in her feminine, he can still be the provider. But if it's someone whose partner is not working at all, then I do think that we need to question whether, why are we only questioning whether she's in her masculine and not whether he's in his feminine.
Absolutely. And
what he can do to come more into his masculine so that she can drop into her feminine. And I think that's a really important piece, because I think sometimes we put the onus of so much on women to make the change. And I think it's, in that case, the man would need to consider his energy as well.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Do you have any last thoughts and, words of wisdom to share? Any recommended books of what people can read and to just get them started on their money mindset?
Yes, loads of books. So there is a book called, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this. There's a book called Get Rich, Lucky Bitch by Denise Duffield Thomas, which is brilliant.
Oh, yeah. I read that book.
Yeah, You're a Badass at Making Money, which is Jen Sincero. Vivian Tu writes a book which is a lot more US focused, so it's called Rich AF, really great book. And I think the last one I would say is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Yeah, brilliant book. I mean, there's so many. I have 10 more, but I think as a start, those are my top 5.
Excellent, great. Any last words of wisdom to share?
Just, even if it's $20, start investing. Just start somewhere. I would tell everyone, men and women, start investing if you're not already.
Great. Well, thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the Illuminations World Podcast. If you liked the episode, share it with your friends, subscribe to our channel, and till next time, take care and live light.
Thanks for tuning in to the Illuminations Podcast. We love having you here. It is our mission to be a beacon of light on your journey towards conscious and mindful living. In our weekly episode, we bring you inspiring change makers in the field of spirituality, healing, personal growth, and wellness who share their insight and expertise so you can navigate your way to a happier, healthier, and more purposeful life.